Hello everyone and welcome back. So I haven't really been playing much in the past 2 weeks. I'm starting to get back into it. I have videos I need to upload once I get a good upload speed, but I guess if you're watching this then I did get a good upload speed. So I am making videos still, but I've had a lot of time in the past couple weeks to just kind of meditate on Shogun and what the main question I was thinking of is what is strategy? Because I get a lot of questions from people and I try and answer them as best I can. I'm not a perfect player, have perfect strategy, but I do my best. And I've just been thinking about, like, what is strategy? What kind of tips do you give people? Because you'll see it a lot on forums. New players will make topics and say, like, I'm new to Total War, what do I do? I.e., what is strategy? And I'm making this video because I think a lot of people have kind of weird ideas about what strategy is and how to really think strategically. Because a lot of times, in response to those kind of topics, people will say they'll throw out like kind of cliche one-liners like hammer and anvil and flanking, and they'll sort of try and make a to-do list in every battle. Like, you do this, and this is what your infantry does, and this is what your cavalry does, and this is what your archers do. And I think it oversimplifies it, and worse than that, it gets people in a mindset that's not good. You start relying on cliches, and it loses you battles. Like, you'll see a lot of criticisms I have in other battles. I'll say, like, this guy shouldn't have been doing that with his cavalry, shouldn't have been doing that with his infantry. Like, a lot of times people will waste them. Like, why is throwing your cavalry away early wasting them in one situation? And in another, great strategy. And so I think there are better ways to think about strategy and how to become a really good player. Make that leap from a decent player who has a basic grasp of things like hammer and anvil, stuff like that, which is all great. I don't want to denigrate strategies like hammer and anvil. Sometimes hammer and anvil is exactly what you need to be doing. But there are times when you do want to do it, and there are times when you don't, and I'll get into that. So my best tip for a new player, or even maybe an experienced one, that maybe has been caught in mindsets like that and getting too rigid in your strategy, there are ways to do it. There are ways to think about battles that'll make you better. And so I'm kind of rambling, so I'll jump right into it. The thing that makes a good player is their ability to adapt and react on the battlefield. Because things like use your cavalry for hammer and anvil is great, but sometimes you don't want to be doing that. And it all depends on what your setup is and what the enemy setup is. So the most important thing to do, first of all, for a new player, is to build an army and know what your army is. And I talked a lot about armies and corps in my building an army video, so I won't get too much into that. But know what your army is, because you have to compare that to the enemy army. And there are two things you need to know when comparing your army to the enemy army that are invaluable in a battle. And you'll see me do it in every live commentary and every non-live commentary, is this. You have your army and you have the enemy army. The first thing you need to do is know what your core is and what it specializes in, and the enemy core. Now, sometimes this is hard to do. If you're thinking strategically, you should have a defined focused core. You need a certain amount of focus in a battle, and have something that will be the crux of your army that will win the battle for you. For me, that's the katana core. My infantry wins the battle for me, and that really affects how I use my other units. I have my core of katanas, and then I have the other two, the archers and the cavalry, and their purpose is to support the katanas. The katanas are the core, the rest is the support, so everything that they're doing is supporting the katanas. So how does that play into what is strategy? How does that actually help you on a battlefield? Well, you need to look at the enemy setup, because if you're using a katana core, 99% of the time you're going to have an infantry advantage. So you don't need your cavalry to turn the infantry battle in your favor. So things like hammer and anvil, if you're using your cavalry to hammer and anvil when you have an infantry advantage, you're actually kind of wasting them. Because think about it. If you have an infantry disadvantage, your infantry is not as good as the enemy's, maybe you're outnumbered or just don't have as many, or the quality isn't quite as good, or whatever, the enemy has better infantry. You need something to turn the battle in your favor, and most of the time that's going to be cavalry. If you have the infantry advantage, your infantry is better, you don't need that cavalry to turn the infantry advantage. So what you should be doing is using your cavalry to neutralize the enemy support, probably their cavalry, but could also be their missiles, given how broken matchlocks still are. And so, sometimes missile units can be the difference. If they have a lot of bow warrior monks or samurais or something, you need to neutralize the support for the enemy's infantry that'll allow yours to just walk in and clean them up. So that's the most important thing I would say for new players. is know what your army is so you can quickly compare it to the enemy's army and know where your advantages and disadvantages are. There are really 4 advantages, but 3 main ones. The main ones are infantry advantage, cavalry advantage, and missile advantage. Pretty simple, 3 main unit types. But you can kind of break down missile advantage into 2 different types. There's the straight up missile advantage, and then there's the skirmish advantage. In the recent video I uploaded, or will be uploading depending on what order I get these up in, the worst attack in Total War history, I said that the red guy had a missile advantage because he had 5 matchlock warrior monks. So that is a missile advantage when compared to 3 bow samurais. But not totally, because the other guy with the bow samurais has a skirmish advantage because he has the range on the bows that can outrange the matchlocks, and so he could skirmish and really do some good damage without committing himself. So those are the 4 real advantages. You need to be able to quickly look at your army and look at the enemy army and know what your advantages and disadvantages are and have your strategy come from that. If you're not running a Katana Corps and you can't be counted on to have an infantry advantage in most battles, then you need to be more careful with your cavalry and consider using them for hammer and anvil because you might need something to turn that battle in your favor. If not, then you should be using them in early action to neutralize support as soon as possible. Hopefully you can kind of scare them into attacking. And that's one good thing about missile advantage. Generally missile advantage is the weakest, and missile cores are generally the most tenuous. I'm not going to say weakest, because if you're good with missile cores, you can still do a really good job. And the good thing about missile cores, while they're not as powerful as the others maybe, they have some serious strategic advantages because you can basically force the enemy to attack you. If you have a skirmish advantage, nobody likes to just sit around and get plunked away by arrows. So you can pretty much bait them into a bad attack. And if you lie in wait, one of my videos actually that I'm uploading recently, I don't know what I'm calling it yet, but I basically made the enemy run all of his infantry and most of his cavalry into my 2 missile units, and then I was able to swarm him and pin him down and just pincer the crap out of him. So missile units make really great distractions. You can use them to force the enemy into a bad attack, and so that's how missile advantages are generally good. Infantry advantages are pretty simple. You run your infantry into the enemy infantry. Generally, infantry advantage is the best because most armies will have most of their army being infantry. That's just the main standby of pretty much every army. Some will be more missile or cavalry heavy than others, but generally infantry advantage is the best, closely followed by cavalry, because the one thing that can turn an infantry battle is cavalry. So be thinking of those 3 different advantages. That's the first thing you need to do. And if the enemy's core isn't obvious, that's the most important thing. Find the enemy's core and neutralize that, or at least cut the support out from under it. But some armies are harder than others to find the core. Mine's pretty obvious. 6 Katana Samurai, 2 Yari Samurai, 5 Light Cavalry, and 2 Bow Samurai is the most recent iteration of that. So it's pretty obvious. With just 2 Bow Samurai, not really a missile core, just not enough of them, despite being pretty good quality. 5 Light Cavalry, not really a cavalry corps. I mean, I have 5 of them, and quantity's good, but the quality, just having 5 light cavalry, they're only going to get off 1 really good charge, and they can maybe get a second one off, but they'll be hurt because they're just terrible in melee and will just get cut down. And Yaris, you can't really make a core out of Yaris. They're just by nature reactive, and your core has to be something that's proactive, and spears are just by nature reactive. You just can't really make a core out of them. So it's obvious that the katanas are the core. So anybody going against my army is going to need to see that and think about how to best deal with the katanas and either cut the support out from under them. Actually, you know what? No, you don't want to cut the support out from under them. You need something to turn the infantry advantage, because I don't need my support to win the infantry battle. That's the important thing. I can just run my katanas into the infantry battle and win most of the time. My other 2 sides of my army, the missiles and the cavalry, are there to neutralize the other guy's support for his infantry, because the only thing that's going to turn the infantry battle in his favor is a bunch of cavalry coming around to hit katanas from the rear. That's the katana's weakness. Cavalry. They get devastated by cavalry charges. So with my 5 light cavalry, that's the way I can neutralize that. I can have 2 cavalry hitting cavalry. I can have 2 light cavalry hitting missiles. Then I can keep 1 on reserve and keep him back, and I can play it so the Yari Samurai are like 2 are on one side, and then the light cavalry is on the other side. It can block charges and just be a deterrent. So I can get more coverage that way. Keeping that 1 light cavalry in reserve to block charges will free up more space for my Yari Samurai, and I can have like a strong side and a weak side when defending against cavalry. because you need to use that cavalry against the Katana Corps. You're probably not going to win in a straight-up fight, especially because most of mine are now veterans, like 6 and 7 chevrons, so you really need something to turn that in your favor. So that's what you need to be thinking about. You're going against the Katana Corps, your infantry is probably not going to win the infantry battle on their own. They need that extra support. So you need to keep your support safe. From my support, that's going to be trying to neutralize yours. So there'll be sort of a meta battle going on outside of the infantry battle. And that's where the strategy comes in. And every battle is going to be different. You just can't walk into a battle with a list of cliches and expect to win against good people that can just change on the fly, and they know what they're targeting. They know what they need to attack. They're not just kind of throwing their army at you. So that's the most important thing for new players, is being able to identify advantages and disadvantages and knowing where to strike. That's most of strategy. It's not a to-do list. It's not cliches. It's not this is what you need to be doing. It's not this unit does this. You need to be more flexible than that. So look at the enemy army. Know what your strength is. Know what your core is. Have a focused core. See my building an army video for more tips on that. And use the support for your core to hit the other guy's support, or maybe even his main line. It just depends on what the enemy army composition is. There's no good way to say this is how you're going to win every battle. It's just not that easy. It's something that takes experience, but if you keep these things in mind, you'll learn a lot faster, and it'll get a lot easier if you're just able to identify advantages and disadvantages and keep the cores in mind. And so that's the best advice I could give to a newer player. So thanks for watching.